Well, our government's using new special powers to comb through your bank accounts, look at where you've been spending your money. Well, every transaction that you make will now be monitored by the government. That appears to be the case. That's exactly what the British government is trying to do, giving itself sweeping powers to secretly monitor your bank accounts. Silke Carlo is the director of Big Brother Watch, and she has been really sounding the alarm on this government overreach. And she joins us now from London. Silke, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So can you educate us on exactly what the UK is trying to do here with bank accounts? And do you think that this will pass?
Yes, the government has essentially snuck in these sweeping powers into a really unrelated bill on data, whereby they will be able to force banks to continuously and repeatedly search bank accounts for what they call indicators of potential fraud and error. So there's not even a crime threshold, there's no suspicion threshold. It's partly administrative because they're looking for errors in the administration of welfare and benefits, including the state's own errors. Really, nothing like this has ever come before. And in fact, it won't even stop at banks, because this extraordinary financial snoopers charter is aimed at third-party organizations. So initially it's going to be banks and building societies, but the people that I've spoken to in the government in formal meetings have said that they're interested in extending this to places like online marketplaces, eBay, and so on. So that essentially any online account that you have could be within the crosshairs of financial state-backed surveillance.
And of course, we all have online bank accounts. There are very few of us operating like the Flintstones these days. So we all have to rely digitally now on banks. We're closing down branches so that everything is moving towards no tellers, and everything is moving digitally. So almost everything then would be caught up in this net. Am I wrong?
It could be, and that's really one of the extraordinary things about these enormous powers, is that they so lack limitation. And in an increasingly digital world, we have to think about what that means. I mean, already it's not just banks, as you say. We've also got the likes of PayPal, other digital payment platforms that people use. We're also seeing a march towards CBDCs, and governments around the world are trying to give the public assurance by saying, it's just conspiracy theorists who think CBDC is going to be used to spy on people and control what you spend. We would never do on that. Well, we would never do. Well, you look at what's happening now with traditional banking, and even with traditional banking, these powers are going to be used to put people under constant monitoring. And the thing about these powers is, of course, it affects the people that can be kind of othered, if you like. So people think it doesn't affect me, it's just people who are in receipt of welfare and benefits. Well, in the UK, that's all of us at some point, because that includes pension. And all of us will become pensioners at some point. If you fall ill, then you'll need to have some kind of sickness payment. So actually it affects a huge amount of the population, and it will expand. Of course, once you have the government inside people's bank accounts, having this kind of backdoor ability to look at what people are spending, I think it's a matter of time before that extends to tax collection and other kind of automated policy enforcement. And that also mirrors, I have to say, what we see in some of the conversation about CBDCs around the world, that governments are already looking at how you can automate welfare and welfare payments and tax collection.
The whole idea, of course, they're spinning this is it's more convenient for you, right? CBDCs, all of this, it's about convenience to improve your life. But of course, really, it's about control and it's about surveillance. The UK, of course, already has a massive surveillance program. I don't think you could walk down any corner in London and not be videoed and photographed in some capacity. So this is just an extension of that. And you pointed out something really interesting I wanted to go back to, which is the idea of where this threshold is, this fraud threshold or whatever it is they're going to be monitoring. So it sounds kind of nebulous, like there's really no specificity to exactly what would be flagged. And they would say, this guy's a terrorist. We need to watch this guy.
You're absolutely right that Britain is already a surveillance society, quite unlike, even far beyond other countries around the world. Now we've got this leap into financial surveillance. I should add as well, as you'll know, in Europe, there are strict cash spending controls now as well.
Yes.
Like you're not supposed to do cash transactions in many European countries over 500 euros, which is about what, $750 or something. They're really quite tight controls. But yes, you're right. I mean, of course, you have to tackle fraud in society, and nobody wants public money to be spent fraudulently. The government already has powers to obtain the bank statements of suspects. And in fact, when you're doing a welfare application, you have to give a huge amount of information: IDs, bank statements, pay slips, a huge amount of information. And that can be then requested again on demand. This is different. This is specifically without suspicion. The government says we're introducing these powers to look at people where there is no suspicion. That should be where the alarm bell is ringing for everybody, because what underpins a free society is the presumption of innocence. And when you lose that, we become a world of suspects, where all of our data has to be looked at all the time, just in case we do something wrong. That is not a free world, but that's the world that's being built around us.
It's terrifying, right? There's no suspicion at all, but we're just going to monitor you in case it's whether it's thought crime. And this is what bothers me, right? It's, you've got a subscription, you've got an online subscription to, our show, like our show gets flagged as dangerous, and so, you're a subscriber to Redacted, or you're a subscriber to a particular newspaper or a Substack of a journalist, and we don't like that. That's thought crime. We have a problem with that, so we want to look more deeply into this individual, right? I mean, this is where this goes, because I'm not one of those people that can sit back and say we should just trust the government. They've never done anything wrong. I mean, they have a long track record of doing these things.
Absolutely. I mean, to say trust the government, they only want these powers for purely benevolent reasons, is its own conspiracy theory, because it's not borne out by any fact, or the path of history shows us that power has to be limited and has to be scrutinized. And that's what we're saying here. We cannot hand over mass, suspicionless bank, building society, endless financial surveillance powers to a government and still call ourselves a free country. You're absolutely right that there is a risk for these powers to be politicized. We saw during the pandemic, the way that financial surveillance powers were used, whether it was PayPal or the Canadian banks deciding to freeze and close the accounts of people that were protesting the government, many of whom I think were vindicated in the actions that they took. And the argument becomes this: once the government has the back door and has the powers, they say, well, it would be wrong if we didn't also use it for this other purpose that benefits society. And it almost becomes then, they will frame it as an obligation that they have to do more surveillance and more enforcement. So, the argument really should begin and end when the government wants to get into your bank account without suspecting you of having done anything wrong. It's as simple as that.
One thing I'm confused about, though, Silky, is the idea that, these credit card companies and these other banks, these institutions, they have massive amounts of already fraud detection in place. So what you're telling me now, the UK government is saying, we think that is substandard. These individual businesses, Wells Fargo, Chase, I don't know the British banks. The ones we have are bad enough, but that they don't have mechanisms in place to monitor fraud. If there's a transaction that gets flagged, someone's using a weird VPN and they're buying a subscription to something they shouldn't be. We know credit cards get shut down all the time. You need to call your bank to verify a transaction, but the government can do a better job of this?
That's absolutely right. Well, the government is going to be deputizing the banks to do this extra surveillance for them. But you're right that already happens on a massive scale. And part of that's because of the landslide for civil liberties that we've had post 9/11. There are all kinds of anti-money laundering and counter-terror financing laws that already mean there's an enormous amount of surveillance and signals monitoring in banks. And if we look at how that's worked out, I can say for the UK, what we have, the banks can generate what are called suspicious activity reports. And that's supposed to signal anything that looks unusual in the way that you described that goes on with someone's bank accounts. But the problem is the vast majority of them are just noise, and they're not picking up on anything whatsoever. And this is the nature of mass surveillance, that even if you have a system that is 99% accurate, which no algorithmic surveillance system is, when you're searching through tens of millions of people, then you're going to have thousands of false positives of people that you'll wrongly accuse and wrongly suspect of being criminals. Put into the welfare context, that doesn't just mean that you're looking at a suspicious payment of about £10,000. It means that the government is potentially thinking about stopping or pausing somebody's payments that help them to eat and that help them to get medication. These people are on the poverty line. Many of them are sick. Many of them have mental health problems that make it very difficult to deal with the administration of the system already. And I think that if this goes ahead, we will see huge injustice.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, we're already seeing this, whether it's the trucker convoy in Canada. We've had journalists here on our show that we featured, excellent journalists, some of the finest independent journalists in the world who have had their Venmo accounts shut down, their PayPal accounts shut down, so they couldn't even travel, they couldn't pay their rent. I mean, this is how they come after you. Silky, how can people join up with this cause? And if you're in the UK specifically, but can you tell us about your website and how people can take action and demand that this doesn't happen?
Yes, absolutely. We're Big Brother Watch. We're bigbrotherwatch.org.uk, and we're on Twitter and Facebook. And then we have a specific campaign site for this, which is stopbankspying.com. And also, it'd be interesting to connect with people around the world that are looking at CBDCs. As I said, we've got this proposal for a CBDC in the UK, which the government wants to launch as early as next year. And our campaign site for that is nospycoin.co.uk.
Love it. Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much for being on the front lines of this and educating us about this. Silky, great to have you here on the show for the first time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I really hoped you enjoyed watching this video. YouTube thinks that you'll actually like this next video right here. It's personalized based on your own viewing habits. So if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about it. And we will see you next time, everyone.